We're looking at some coconino sandstone just above Soap Creek Rapid. And in the coconino are these really...
I just want to say, you guys who know me know I'm not a fossil guy because I study the Precambrian, but we'll see if I can contribute anything here or ask the right questions or better questions than the average person would do. Remember, I say average person, I'm not insulting you, all right? You know, I've been doing this, you know, I went to school for, I don't know, how many years, 6? You know, and then I've been doing this for 25. You know, yeah, it took me a little longer to get my bachelor's degree because I had a military obligation. But that aside, you know, I'm just trying to get you to think outside of what you would be like if you just saw this guy presenting and you knew nothing about rocks, okay? I'm not insulting anyone.
Cool tracks. We don't know if they're amphibian or reptile tracks, but some kind of 4-footed animal. And you can see the toes right here and the heel back here. And the tracks...
Okay, I'm pretty sure he's going to argue these were water laying. I'm pretty sure. However, as someone who has walked up many sand dunes, dry ones, you can get these prints, this print pattern. Granted, I wear shoes, but I've done this and seen the sole of my shoe mark, and then you get that blob behind it. Could you get that in water? I would think it would be more cracked because your wet sand tends to be more cohesive. So some parts are going to, you know, you're not going to get that nice round. You're going to break it up a little. I mean, just remember anyone who's made a sandcastle and it falls down, it doesn't blob its way down. It breaks and shit, you know, falls off in pieces.
Always go up the crossbed slopes. We've not found any tracks out of the thousands of trackways that are known from the coconino. None of them go downhill. And the other thing...
Something important to remember too that I haven't said yet, when you have a dune, simple dune, sand dune, you know, blown by wind, so your wind's coming in, it doesn't matter what direction, simple cross section here, and you have 2 sides. You have a leeward side and this side. I forget what the technical name is, I'm sorry. But your sand grains get blown and some will get deposited and then they tumble down. And so you get other structures, okay? So you have your windward and leeward side, okay? So I don't know which side these animals are running up. I don't think it matters, but I don't know where he's going with them. Why do you always see him? I mean, you know, of course you're going to run up a sand dune because you want to see what's over it. I mean, reptiles, amphibians have eyes.
That's kind of curious about the sandstone is the maximum dip is going this direction, but many times the tracks actually go at an angle to the dip, but the claws are kind of pointing up dip a little bit.
I know where he's going with this. He's going to say that right there is evidence that a current was moving them. I know that's where he's going with this. Could that do that? Yeah, you know. But I mean, at first I thought he was going to say, you know, they're running uphill at an angle, so obviously it's water lane. But no, I mean, no, I can run up hills at different angles. But he says the prints move. Now that could just be a footing thing because they're not running straight up. And, you know, they move a little bit. That's why the man tracks aren't man tracks. They're just dinosaurs walking on mud. Or this could simply just be pushed by the wind if there's a good wind. I don't know. Or they could be being chased. You know, there's other explanations than in water. Now, is water one of the explanations? I don't know, probably. But let's see where he goes. I have the feeling he's probably done papers on this, and I don't mean Christian papers.
The tracks are also very nicely preserved. Oftentimes you can find distinct toe impressions and things like that. And there's been a debate as to whether these tracks were made in dry sand, whether the tracks were made in damp sand, or perhaps sand that was underwater. Dr. Leonard Brand has studied these tracks extensively, both in the field and in the laboratory. And in the laboratory, he took an aquarium and he made a sand dune inside the aquarium, filled the aquarium up with water, and then used some amphibians to make tracks underwater. And the amphibian tracks that he made underwater best matched the tracks that are here in the Coconino. Of course, he made tracks in dry sand and damp sand as well, but the underwater tracks were the ones that really show the detail.
Here's my questions, and maybe he's just not telling you because you're a general audience. We had a control there. We had different experience running. That's good. That's good. And the rocks themselves, if this is a quartz arenite and the grains are frosted and decently rounded and sorted, meaning close to 1 grain size, well sorted would be really close to 1 grain size, it's more than likely wind blown with these angles. Or it could be like a beach bar, or not a beach bar, a sandbar in a nearshore marine environment, because we see stuff like this in the St. Peter, but only in the Starved Rock member, which was a sandbar, which means at times it was above sea level. So it could be either or, I guess. I don't know, but you need to look at the rock texture, the petrology as well. You can't just use the fossils. Fossil footprints. You got to look at the rock too. You've got to attack this from multiple angles. You can't just hyper focus on one thing. And even if this was lay down in water with dips of 15 to 20 degrees or 25 degrees, I don't see how that proves a global flood. This is a local set of outcrops. Yeah, the Grand Canyon's big, but it's not planetary in scale. Anyway, let's just move on.
And because of those kinds of experiments, we think that these tracks in the Coconino sandstone were made underwater. And in fact, Dr. Brand published the research in several reputable journals, one paper even in the journal Geology in 1991. So these are some animal tracks. They're maybe not as distinct as some of the others. Some of the sandstone hasn't been peeled away yet. You can see here. And 2 sets, a left side and a right side, are going up here, front and rear tracks. And the animal is crawling sideways up this underwater sand dune. And you can see some of the detail in this track.
It doesn't look sideways to me. It looks like it's at an angle, but not sideways. It could just be changing direction as it's moving, running, whatever it's doing. I don't think that shows necessarily it was deposited in water, and even if it was, like I said, that doesn't mean there was a global flood 4,500 years ago and the Earth is 6,000 years old. It's one location.
Right here, some of the sand has been pushed back away. Now the tracks always go up the slopes of these sand dunes. We don't see them going sideways. And what we think this means is that there are animals that are underwater trying to crawl to the surface. And sometimes we even see these tracks disappear in the middle of a nice flat surface like this. And so we think the animal might have actually been picked up by a water current. If these were tracks made in a desert,
or the conditions were no longer right for footprints, or it's on land to begin with and it reached its goal, or it was picked up by a predator. It could have been picked up by a winged animal then, at least not by a pterosaur. But there's other explanations. I mean, the tracks just disappearing, even if that is true, doesn't mean this is waterline. I don't see how I don't know. He's not explaining enough, and that's fine because I know this is general audience, but he's not explaining enough to tell you one way or the other. Obviously, he thinks it's waterline. That's obvious, and he's presenting the evidence that he thinks shows it's waterline. But I guarantee you the stuff I've told you needs to be taken into account as well. You need to think of alternative explanations, not just the one you want. And us scientists do this because we're human. We need to go where the evidence leads us, but we get an idea in our heads, and it doesn't matter if you're a young Earth creationist or not. You sometimes will let your hypothesis lead you, so you won't be thinking about the things I'm thinking about. Because to me, it's indifferent. I'm indifferent if this is water lane or if this is dunes. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't mean there was a great flood. Also, ding, where's the ripple marks? You can get ripple marks in sand, but water usually always forms ripple marks. I have yet to see a single ripple mark. So, you can't just hyper-focus on what your hypothesis is. You need to be able to try to defeat yourself. Because if you don't try to defeat yourself and think of alternative explanations, someone else is going to do it. Okay? So, let's watch the rest of this. We're a little past halfway.
We really wouldn't be able to explain why sometimes these tracks suddenly begin and end. And so based on those kinds of evidences, we think that the explanation for these tracks, the best explanation, is that these tracks were made underwater. Okay, we're wetting these tracks because sometimes the detail shows up a little bit better on the wet rock. And so the sun angle is really nice right now, and the water helps bring out some of the detail that you might otherwise miss. I'm going to put my scale back in here. Whenever I take a geological photo, I put a scale in there so I know how big it is, and I can...
Props, Whitmore. Not only are you putting a scale in there, but you're putting a metric one in centimeters and not just throwing a coin down there. Yeah, you can get the size of a coin. And I've done it for my books because my geology roadside books are made for the average person or close to it, some of general interest. So I'll put something familiar to them in the photo. But scientifically, unless for some unknown reason I don't have something like this, I will use this. This is what you should do. He's dead on. This is exactly how you should do it. And if you do have a coin, you need to sit there and say how the size of it in your explanation of the figure. And especially if it's something that can vary in size, like a marker or a lighter, something like that, or a lens cap. Okay, you can't just do it. But this is exactly what you do. There's nothing wrong with this. This is what you're supposed to do. And anyone out there taking scientific photos for geology purposes in the field, please do this. He's right.
Work on those measurements right on the computer screen if I need to. Over there we saw the tracks, the lizard or amphibian tracks that were made underwater. And then over this way we see the parting lineation or current lineation on the rock. And this is a feature that I've seen everywhere where I've studied coconino. It's a very prominent feature in the rock. And the sand is avalanched downhill in this direction. And this kind of parallel pattern that we see in the rock, you can see it kind of goes in this direction. This is called parting lineation or current lineation. And this is something that we can see form today. And it does not form in dry desert environments. It only forms in underwater environments.
It does, actually. That would be your leeward side of your dune, just individual grains falling down. But you can get that on the leeward side of a dune. I don't know why he said that. Maybe it's more common underwater. I've never seen these in any significant way. But I have seen these on fluvial or stream deposits in the Oronto group in the Upper Peninsula. But those are fluvial, so they alternate, they're stream deposits. And, you could have had rain and water wash down there. I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But we're almost to the end of this, so we'll finish it up here.
And we have examples in riverbeds and so forth where we see this pattern form. So again, this is parting lineation or current lineation, and this is one more evidence that the coconino was put down underwater.
It's basically the end. But here's the thing too, current doesn't just mean water. Wind direction is current too. Wind is current. Hello.
Hi, thank you.
Multi-pass. Gonna go to the pavilion area. This building sat empty for years and they redid it on the inside, and man, it's awesome. They got a up top deck where you have to be 21 or older, so there's no children there, and you can get food. It's glorious. Anyway, so I'm just gonna park over here, change my shoes. See the dune to the left? It's probably where I'm gonna go because it's not much walked up or anything like that. So we'll go there. Plus I gotta get water down at the lake. So, yeah. Okay, we can see that dry sand does preserve a print, but not as well as wet sand. See the two there, and there. So we're gonna go up to a shallow dipping dune. I'm probably just gonna go to the other side of this where it's quiet. I have to find something that's not too off from 20 degrees. So we'll go over here. Okay, so here I'm gonna distantly try to get a slope here. So it does not have to be an accurate measurement, just needs to be relatively representative because I'm gonna use that slope, not taking an exact measurement of strike and dip or anything, waiting for that bubble to be levelish. So we got a slope dip around 25 degrees. It's not too bad, I'm gonna use it anyway. Got some nice wind-blown ripple marks here. Those are pretty cool. So there's not a lot of footprints here. This is what I want to use, but it is a little wetter. You can see as I'm walking up, you're not getting defined prints. You can see that cracking because it's moist. Now here, he's a little older. Those nice ripple marks. So I think I'm just gonna go right here. As you can see, a lot of these dunes are a lot more than 30 degrees. That's just that 30 degree angle of repose. It just applies if you dump a bunch of sand in a pile. But this isn't just that. Number one, it's got moisture in it. Number two, things are growing on it on top that'll hold it. Number three, when the wind deposits this stuff, it's not loose. It feels loose when you're walking on it, but it's not. It's the wind will sort it and fill in those pore spaces better than if you just dumped it in a pile. So it can actually be more than 30 degrees. But I may not even need to use the water. Let's go right here. Oh, we have some bird prints. Right there. Let's try this. Okay, this sand, I'm gonna go, it's not a quartz arenite. This is glacially derived. Yes, it was deposited by wind, but it is glacially derived. So we have a lot of lithics in here. It's mostly quartz, but there's lithics and a little bit of feldspar. So, and the grains are a little more angular, which also helps keep the shape and slopes a little steeper. So, it's not exactly representative, but I wanted to do something in nature. I was gonna buy a bunch of sand and just dump it, but I'd have to compact it then, and I don't have anything to do that with. So I just thought I'd come here, it's a lot easier. So, let's get started. Okay, you look at this and it looks dry. Then you rub off the first couple millimeters. I mean, not even a 1/10 of an inch really. And you can see there's moisture. That's what makes that singing sands. So I don't need to dump any water. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my hands. We're gonna go to someplace hopefully a little drier up there so I can do it there. But we're just gonna pretend this is a car. I mean, we're gonna get a basic shape. Let's do my left hand, I'm left-handed. So something comes down, walks, comes up. Walks, comes up. Now, only humans really go directly uphill in something like this. Your tendency is going to want to be to go off because it's easier to go off in one direction or another up here, even though it's longer, it takes less energy because the maximum slope is directly perpendicular. That's here, that's a maximum slope. If you're doing less than, what was that, 25 degrees, you're going this way and you're doing 15, it's less energy even though it's longer. So that's why animals don't go straight up a dune. That's something humans do. Okay, so let's look at what I did here. you can see that even in moist sand, no, I'm talking 4%, 3% moisture content, you can see it doesn't form nice, just sloped back prints. It cracks. See this? And that's just with minimal moisture. Now, I'm going to actually dump more on here and do it again with that water I got from the lake and see if it changes any. Okay, it's not perfect, but it'll do. I do need to give it a couple seconds to soak in, but I don't want it to get too dry, as then this won't work. So let's just try it again right here. See, yeah, it's pretty wet a little down, about maybe 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 centimeter. I don't know. Anyway, let's do it again. Okay, so I did it here. Let's look at it. It's even cracked worse. Yes, I get defined toes or fingers in this case, but other than that, this is not forming what we see in a coquina sand at all. There it is compared to that. So you can look at them side by side for a second, right there. So I'm going to go up that way. So let's see if I can get any dry sand that way. All right, I need to put this on my back so I don't fall again. I just crawled up that slope on all fours. And look, went straight up, and that doesn't look like anything in the coquina. You get here, and there's barely any prints. The sand here is a lot harder. It's not more compact, because as you can see by the ripple marks, wind's generally from the northwest, which is that way, going to the southeast, which is that way. This is almost due north-south. So it's more compact, leaving less of an impact of a footprint. Now, I am 285 pounds. So what is that in kilograms? 129 kilograms, 130, somewhere around there. I know it's less than 130 exactly, but it's close enough to that. So I'm a big SOB, and I am not leaving very deep footprints. My footprints here, just walking, they're not very deep, okay? Not very deep over here either, all right? Right here, see, you can barely see them. Now, the kilogram lizard or amphibian or 2.5 pound, 2.2 pound reptile, amphibian, whatever, it's not gonna leave much of a print in this. And there's birds here. We saw bird prints down there, so they probably were up here too. What does that tell us? It tells us when the sand becomes really compact and something light walks upon it, you don't get prints. The slope levels out a little bit here too. It's not too much more level, but it is more level. So the point of that little ramble is that's probably why the footprints disappear. It's just because the sand is more compact and something that small doesn't leave massive prints. So yeah, so let's try right in front of me and see if this is any drier. Might have to smooth, oh we got a smooth part right here, but I gotta watch my slopes because this stuff is steeper. Not right here. Let's do it. Okay, this sand is drier, but it's not perfectly dry, or less than 1%, but we'll use it. Give it a minute. We are on the windward side too, so hopefully it'll dry out. I just need a small area, just to let you know. See, we have a pretty shallow slope right here, so I'm gonna do it right here. See if I can repeat any of that. This time I think I'm gonna go smaller with less force.
A few moments later.
Okay, I did it like this, with a lot less force. Sand is a lot drier. What do we see? We see the pushing out is more rounded, more mounded. Okay, that's what we see. but we don't see any distinct toe features or anything. We can tell vaguely that might be a print. So really dry sand doesn't seem to work as well either, but neither does something with a measly 4% moisture. So I'm going to try to get down to maybe something with a little less than 4% moisture. Same area here, I'm gonna wipe it clean. Okay, I think I did that enough. You can see if I dig down, it starts getting a little moist because obviously moisture holds shape better. We don't build sandcastles out of dry piles of sand. Okay, but let's try this here. I hope the wind isn't bad because it's whipping here. Try it again, just do 2. Okay, I don't have enough moisture. Let's try it again. This is probably not much more than I just did. It's drying out really quick too with the wind. I gotta do this faster. Let's try it again. Okay, what do we see? We still see cracks, but we do see some toes. Let me see if I can get anything in dry sand. So the cracks are cracks, okay? We don't see that coquina, but what we do see, let's see if I can just see if you can see any. I'm just gonna do it very lightly in these. See, it's got moisture in it. I'll let the wind dry it out for a second or so. Well, probably a minute. I'll make it 2 minutes, see what that does. Okay, let's give this a go. Sliding, sliding, sliding. Okay, I got it right here. It's still too wet down here, but look it up here. It's relatively dry, less than 1%. Well, probably less than 2. I wouldn't take it less than 1. But you see the well popped out heel mark, and you see the toes. Now, as we go deeper, we know moisture increases, but it's still pretty deep. There we go. See, so it's only dry in maybe the upper ½ centimeter or so, quarter of an inch. You can get it, and I did this very lightly this time. I didn't go all like this like I did the other ones, so it is possible. Okay, so what we learned from that little demonstration today? Well, we learned several things. That even the driest of sands are going to contain moisture. Yes, this is Lake Michigan. Yes, this is a back beach dune environment. It doesn't matter. It's aeolian or windblown, just like the sands of the coquina are. Now, I tried several different ways. I did as dry as I could, and it wasn't really doing anything. You'd see the ball roll, but you couldn't make out any discernible features. I did just the natural moisture where you could see the toes or fingers in the case, however many I was using. And you could see those really well, but the roll, the sand displacement for the palm or heel, whatever you want to call it, was cracked, and it did that exact same thing for the wet. Now, the wet gives you the most discernible footprint, but you can clearly tell in the sand, when I say wet, the wettest sand, when I watered it down, we were probably still below 10%. So, I mean, you don't need a lot of moisture in this stuff. Now, when I got the best print, when it was more than 1% moisture, but less than 4 or 5. So in there. And just because the sands are aeolian in an arid or semi-arid environment doesn't mean there's no moisture in that sand. And it rains. Rain is a thing. I said it just rained here yesterday. So rain even happens in arid areas too. So it's going to hold some of that. Now, groundwater here is at lake level, and I forget what that level is here. I think it's 580 feet above mean sea level. So, I'm only maybe 10 meters or 33 feet above that. So I'm not much higher than that when I was on that dune. So I'm nowhere near groundwater, even though groundwater is probably only maybe a little higher than lake level under the dune, because it tends to follow topography in sandy environments especially. But the point is, that last one, you could see features of the toes or fingers, as well as you got a nice mounded ball of sand behind it. You didn't get the cracks, right? And we showed that as you walk up on the dune there, if you get an area that's extra compacted because it's had time for like groundwater to move through it, the wind to compact it, all that stuff, that the prints all but disappear. And if I wasn't, 130 kilograms, you probably wouldn't even see it. If I was half a kilogram, about a pound, you wouldn't even see them. So there's no reason to just assume water lane because prints disappear. That doesn't make sense. And I already explained that they go sideways because that's more energy efficient than going straight up a dune like dumb large monkeys on two legs do. Speaking about me there. So another thing too against that being water lane is the dunes you can tell. Now, Whitmore says they go mostly south, but you can tell by looking at them there are changes of direction. So that happens in a windy environment, even though you might have, like here, we have a strong northwest wind usually, but it's not always northwest. And if it changes direction and that windward side where, say, prints are, becomes a leeward side, sand's going to pile up on that and help preserve those prints a lot better than it would in a sloshy water lane environment. Now, we don't really see prints of animals or sea creatures in anything with any significant depth of water. We see worm burrows, and in shallow marine deposits, we'll see some trilobite prints and stuff like that. And, when life evolved in rivers and streams, we'll see dinosaur prints, stuff like that. But you need nice, calm water for those type of things to preserve in a watery environment. Currents and eddies are not going to preserve those things. So, yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that, okay? So you need that kind of environment to preserve prints in water. In the only environment, you don't. You don't need this. Wind can switch direction, it can switch speed, and you're all good. Okay, so overall, the 3 videos we just watched, Whitmore does a pretty good explanation of the science. The guy that takes them, maybe he is a structural geologist. But that strike and dip thing bothers me. He did a pretty good job. Did a real good job. Now, as for the conclusions, I don't know, but nowhere in here does he say there was a great flood 4,500 years ago and the earth is 6,000 years old. I do notice a lot of the PhD guys, even though they are on the side of young earth creationists, they very seldom say that. Austin almost never says it. Baumgartner almost never says it. Snelling does. Snelling has no problem just being loud, like I can talk. But anyway, it's, from a geologist standpoint, as basic information, this isn't bad. Are the interpretations right? They're interpretations, but you gotta think of alternative interpretations as well. You have to second guess yourself. And then you go looking for more evidence. And he said evidences, and that's something young earth creationists always say. And technically it's correct. It sounds academic, but no one on this side of the pond says it. We say evidence. Evidence is plural in and of itself. All right? You don't need to add the S. It doesn't make you look smarter. And I'm not saying that because of him. I'm saying that young earth creationists in general, because I hear them say it all the time. And then when you say it, I know where you got your information from. So, just try to avoid it. But, overall, this wasn't bad. This wasn't bad 3 videos. So, I went into this thinking this guy was going to be like Snelling, and he's not. And, he's probably a guy I would go out in the field with as a geologist. I could learn stuff from this guy. I honestly think I could learn a lot from this guy. But it's not going to convince me the Earth is 6,000 years old, because there's mounds of evidence against that isn't just geological. You got to do everything, Anyway, I think that's it. If you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and I hope you learned something. That right here. Oh, that's one hell of a windbreaker, isn't it? Oh no, that's a dryer. I'm an idiot.